You're back with The Nation, and I'm joined by McCarten, former Labour activist and Herald columnist, stand-up political commentator Colin James in Wellington. Welcome to you both. If I can start with hello. If I can start with you, Matt. You saw that interview with David Shearer. What did you make of his performance?
Not bad. I mean, I think we saw at the conference last week. What you've actually seen, he's crossed the Rubicon. You know, he's crossed the line. He now has got legitimacy as the leader of the Labour Party, and you can see it. He was very clear. He was very firm, and starting to feel very comfortable. And I think there's been a watershed, and I think it's the new man we're seeing. The new man.
What do you make of him, Colin James? Has he found a new voice?
Well, I wouldn't go quite that far, but he certainly ended with this week with his supporters feeling a lot stronger. And I thought he was much firmer in his interview with you than I've seen from him in the past. One caveat I'd have is that the action he took against David Cunliffe I thought was more in anger than out of cool strategy. But there's no doubt that the test that he had, which was the conference, people were saying to me as far back as September, I mean, people that I would take notice of, that he had to take the conference with him, and I think at the end that's the way I would read the conference. They did warm to him in a way that before the conference you couldn't be sure about.
Colin, do you think he's emerged stronger? Do you think it hasn't necessarily been a bad thing for David Shearer, what's happened in the last week?
I think he has, but I qualify it because I don't think he's yet settled all the doubts. And that really comes to whether he's going to make sure that the real David Shearer comes through. And that's quite a big issue. I'm told he's going to get advice, and that sort of advice sounds a bit sort of flimsy or marketing. It's not that. It's not just media training. It takes two forms. It's professional advice. You get the person to be him or herself more clearly. You remove what obscures the person, and you also remove what distracts voters from seeing that real person. You can't change the person, but you can just better bring out the person. If you go back in history, Norman Kirk did it. Bob Harvey changed a fat, greasy slob into a quite well-dressed, well-mannered fellow that you could then see the intelligence and the eloquence and the strength. David Longy got his stomach stapled, and instead of going like this all the time, you could actually see a guy who looked as though he could be Prime Minister. Helen Clark, she put on lipstick and designer clothes, and the old policy wonk, the awkward policy wonk, moved aside, and people could actually see someone who had the strength to be Prime Minister. So, as I said before, the people don't change. What changes is the removal of what blocks people from seeing them. So then it's a question of what David Shearer we see once he's done that.
OK, Matt McCarten, what about Labour? We've talked about David Shearer, how that's emerged. What about Labour? Is it, you know, it's been fairly exposed. Is it weakened as a party or strengthened?
No. It was a good conference. I think that those who've been around, Colin by his comments now, he's been all the way right back to Norm Kirk. But you know, the conference, it was a big conference. A lot of them, they would have come. Is Shearer up to it? You know, that was the question in their mind. I think that's been answered. Now, I think he'll go from strength to strength. And Colin's right. You know, Helen Clark took years before people warmed to her. I think what they've got now is a leader. He's still on trial, as he should be, but there's been a change. I think the party's got through its... the leadership question has been settled. There won't be an election in February. Oh, absolutely. There's no question. You know, that Colin says, I think he acted in anger against Cunliffe. He had to do it. I thought it was a masterstroke. You know, he took the conference, brings the caucus up and says, I want to vote in no confidence, and I'm dumping him. You know?
So you don't think there's any risk at all of a split?
No, it's all nonsense. This is a party which is 2 years away from the election. Things have changed for Key, that people aren't as enamoured and trusting of Key as they used to be. It's only small, but it's changed. The thing that Shearer has got, with Cunliffe he didn't have, is people can like him. And that's the difference, that people don't vote for people they don't like. Clark took a long time to get people to like and respect her. I think that it's going to be easier for Shearer. I think he's got the same qualities as Key. And I think the party is starting to come around to that position now. They had the best conference they've had possibly in a generation. The numbers were up, the mood was good. You know, there was a bit of distraction as with the leadership question, but I think that actually helped in the end, because it showed that Shearer has got the bottle. The question was, is he ruthless enough? Is he tough enough? And Labour parties like their leaders to be strong. And I think that, you know, is Shearer a Bill Rowling, or is he a Clark? And I think that question was answered last weekend.
Colin, James, do you agree? Yes, do you agree with that? Do you think Shearer's going to be there? No risk of a split, and he will be there in 2014?
Let's leave David Shearer aside for a moment. Let's go back to the conference. If I look for a parallel to this conference, and I said it last week, there's new energy and new blood at this conference in a way that I haven't seen for quite a long time. And if I look for the parallel, it's 1997, after a terrible period for the Labour Party. Suddenly, there was a new energy at the conference. I think it was in Christchurch. And I do remember, ironically, going to one of the workshops that was on trade, and there were about 5 people in favour of free trade and the rest of the room was against it. David Cunliffe, who I'd never seen before, emerged on the side of the free traders. There's a bit of an irony. He's now seen as a standard bearer for the left. But that's the parallel. It's a party that did feel as though it's on the way back. Now, that doesn't mean it wins in 2014 necessarily. A couple of things about that. One is it moved a bit to the left. It also still had a lot of identity politics. That's paying special attention to groups within society. That's been around for 30 years and the Labour Party is now starting to feel a bit quaint. But the second, and David Shearer picked this up in his interview and made quite a point about it, and David Cunliffe has been part of this, a statement that there's going to be a more active government, and that certainly was what the conference supported. So David Shearer, in that sense, very much in tune with the conference. OK,
well, saying that, Colin, how will the changes to the Constitution, how is that going to change the party, particularly come February?
Well, I don't think what it does is there's a number of changes which makes the party, I think, work better. For instance, something that no one's talked much about, but shifting from regions to hubs, and the hubs are then geared around campaigning and so on. And they did a little bit of this in the last election. But much of the focus was on the 60% rule and whether the party should have a role in electing the leader. And they got the 60%, I think, just wrong. And a lot of people, I think, felt duped. They thought they were voting for more democracy in the party, and they are, because the party's now involved in selecting the leader, but they thought the 60% made it more democratic. One of the interesting things about when you look at the left is the word democracy occasionally gets attached to the word solidarity, and democracy has a different feel about it then. And I think a number of people felt they were duped in that. But I think you'll see it's a more modern party. They brought in the idea of registered supporters, and down the track, the next conference, I should say, they're going to bring in a draft policy, or a policy platform to which, a high-level platform to which MPs will be have to be bound.
What do you make of the changes?
Yeah, no, I mean, the changes, they've turned it in from a sort of monolithic sort of bureaucratic with all sorts of layers, you know, which is really from the 60s and 70s. And what they've got is flatlined. It's, as Colin said, it's around the hubs. It's a campaign party, you know, and sort of you work with what is real. And of course, under MMP, you're going for the party vote. It's not just electorates. And of course, and both National and Labour, still they had their structures around the electorates, and that's changed. It's really, you know, is where like Auckland is Auckland, you know, and Whangarei is Whangarei. So they've done those things, but and so it makes it easier, the decisions are made easier, and that the party membership is saying anyone who wants to help, there's actually a place. You know, you don't have to sort of sign up sort of a local branch. So they've done all that, and Colin's right, there wasn't much attention to who that. So it's been the biggest constitutional and structural change within the party, but Colin's right about the party policy. That is huge. That means is that the party policy platform, it is established and the caucus is bound by it. If that had been in,
have so much more say, don't they?
Indeed, and that if that had been in the 80s, the Rogernomics crew would have never been able to do what they did, and that's what's kind of quite different about the party today than it was in the 80s.
Colin, do the ghosts of the 1980s, do they still haunt this party?
Yes, they do, and we saw Len Richards, for instance, who left the party over that, was one of the prime speakers in the 60-40 debate. It's still there, but I think it's fading, and I think what we saw at the conference was a lot of younger people, and that, to them, that's history. And so I think we're seeing a shift there. And David Shearer, actually, although he's a baby boomer, I think is more open to that sort of shift than leaders have been in the past.
You're quite right about that. You see, that's what I've always believed, is that about Cunliffe was still seen back with the Clark years, you know, and that Cunliffe, he came in, he's the new face, and so therefore you're not trapped. You know, I was speaking to one of the MPs last week who said about the the 80s, about the Labour government then, and said, well, that was really ACT. You know, that wasn't us. You know? And Colin's quite right. Like, we sit here and go, the 80s, because we were 20-year-olds all running around at the time. You know, most of the party activists now weren't born there, you know, so it is like when I was that age, they used to talk about the war, you know.
Colin, does David Shearer need Helen Clark's endorsement, do you think? Would that be useful?
I think David Shearer committed the unforgivable sin of getting a higher proportion of the vote in the by-election than Helen Clark got in the 2008 election.
It's actually good. It's actually good. It's good that he doesn't get the endorsement, I think, because he's his own person. He's no longer the mantle of Helen, Grad, you know, that I appoint you as my leader. That's good.
I was saying before about the sort of David Shearer that might come through. He's a decent, likeable, middle ground, steely sort of guy, and there's actually underneath there, we saw a bit of that in your interview, and David Cunliffe has felt a bit of that steel now. He's also the not Wellington candidate, and now John Key is the Wellington candidate, and as the economy slows, that could actually count quite importantly. The other side, as I mentioned last week, is the David Shearer who is out of the country for a lot of time. He doesn't really know New Zealand well enough to be Prime Minister yet. He doesn't really know politics well enough. He's learning fast, and he doesn't really quite know the Labor Party well enough. But he's showing that he can learn, as John Key did eventually. Showed he could learn.
So how does
it's a fresh start.
So how does David Shearer then play to his strengths? How does he win the appeal? Does he stay out of Parliament? Does he get into the field? Does he get around the country?
Yes, and all that. No, I think he's got, you know, do interviews like he did with you, that people got to get more, that I've got to know him. Plus, he's got the sort of set of vision, you know, that what you've got with Key, who's likeable, or has been likeable, and that's been his strength. But I think what Shearer's doing right, you know, 100,000 homes, you know, it's like, wow. You know, this is big stuff, you know, and it's about...
Yeah, but how doable is it?
It doesn't... Well, I would say, yes, it's doable. It's about... It's about will, and what we've been all taught now, you know, this invisible sort of market will fix it all, but that's just not happening. And so it does differentiate toward... But what he did about the 100,000 at the conference, right, was also directed at the base. You know, it's saying is, you know, like every good politician, first of all, has got to win their own party. And I think that's what he's doing. And I think as he does big things like that, you're going to have very clear alternatives at the next election.
OK,
Colin and James... the bit of the base that he's got to win is actually in the provinces and the suburbs. And that's where the identity politics doesn't work.
And Labor needs to unite, and Labor needs to put all this behind it. Do you have faith, Colin James, that Labor can do that?
Faith? I don't have faith. I just watch things. Look, I'm not sure. I think that the party is coming together. Whether it's going to be in a position to be leading the next government after 2014, I'm doubtful about. And partly that depends on Labor being able to present an alternative government, as Helen Clark was able to with the alliance, with Matt McCarten involved deeply in it, in '99, and that's not there yet. So we'll see. There's 2 years to go, though, Rachel.
Yes,
There's 2 years without any internal distractions, so he did the right thing. The last three polls have shown is that Labor-led is ahead of National-led at the moment.
And there we shall leave it. Gentlemen, appreciate your analysis for us. Colin James in Wellington, Matt McCarten here in studio with us. Thank you so much.